Today we have a story of an entitled parent who seems to be maybe the most negative person on the planet. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, always my fault. For context, every single time I ask my mom if she's seen something I lost, or when she asks me what I'm looking for when I'm searching around the house, she's the one that always puts my things away even when I tell her not to. Without me asking, she would help me find it. But after about 3 minutes of not being able to find it, she'll start crap-talking me while searching for it. By the time she finds it, she'd probably throw it to the floor or throw it right at me, calling me all sorts of demeaning names. To this point, I just told her, if I ask you if you know where something is, if you do, tell me. If you don't help me find it. I had dance class today, which I really wanted to attend, but I couldn't find my belt. I had only one belt, which was in a large bag of accessories that I always kept in my room. I asked my mom, and she didn't reply. I really wanted to go to dance class today, but I couldn't because I spent about 2 hours searching for the bag. I was tossing everything around in the house 3 times trying to find it, even getting so worked up that I began crying from the stress for how one large bag could just go missing even though I left it beside my own bed. While searching, my mom just watched me for 2 hours straight, not saying anything. She was babying my big brother and playing her games, not caring that I had a mental breakdown from not being able to find my thing that she'd kept without my knowledge. Only 2 hours later, she yelled at me, asking what I'm searching for. I repeated again before she finally pointed to a box in the living room, screaming at me that it was inside the box. My mom was constantly buying online packages, so I just assumed those were hers and that she didn't want me touching them, which was why I never checked them in the first place. She began degrading me again, calling me demeaning names and, as always, putting all the blame on me and making me look like a crappy person. She did this all while I was locked in my room, talking crap about me to my brother. Examples being, she asked me not to help her and she still went around and did all this nonsense. I asked for her help by asking her where it was, if she knew. She knew where but didn't tell me and watched me frantically search for it for 2 hours. I already told her and she still wants to say that I didn't. No, she did not. This one is just to twist the story to her benefit and make me look like an idiot in her eyes. If she doesn't want me to keep her things, she should keep it herself. In which, I do keep my own things. But because she doesn't like where I keep them, she'll move them anyway. She keeps skipping dance class and wasting my money. I'm going to resign her from going. I only didn't go today because I couldn't find my belt that she knew where it was but refused to tell me. I really wanted to go today but couldn't because of her. I woke up in the afternoon so I missed breakfast, but because of this I had to rush off somewhere after and she refused to give me lunch. The place I needed to go to was super far from my house. I took a cab there and there was nowhere that sold food there. I also rushed out of the house because I didn't want to be around her, so I didn't grab any snacks. So I lasted until 7 p.m. before I had my first meal of the day, which was dinner with my friends. When I tried to ask her to pick me up because I'd missed the last train, because the timing they had given me online was wrong, she blamed me for checking wrongly? I don't know, and she refused to help me, saying that since I want to run out of the house without telling her, I should come back home myself. Imagine if I didn't have a friend with me. I'm someone that can't do things on my own. I would have genuinely been stranded there until the next day because I didn't know how else to head back home. I don't know what this mom's deal is, but they seem like they're almost enjoying trying to make things so difficult for OP. Like almost as if they're playing a game where they try to see how many times they can break OP and just say, yes mom, you're right, yes mom, you're always right. I mean, she actually just sounds like those kinds of parents that want to break their kids, make them mindless automatons that just follow their parents for the rest of their lives, do whatever their parents ask them to, and just live with them forever. Like, actually make sure they hamper them every step of the way through adolescence so that they just can't do anything but be reliant. Desert Dame commented, "She's messing with you deliberately. How old are you? It sounds like you both fight a lot too. My best advice is to disengage as much as possible. You sound a bit disorganized and always in a rush. The missed meals, the missed train by not reading the schedule right. Have you been tested for ADHD or ADD? It's something to consider because you'll need to learn to act with intention and mindfulness. Create the habit of putting the one thing in one place all the time, deliberately slowing down. I know this because I am ADHD. Always last minute trying to find something, etc. Creating a specific place and habit is so helpful. For me, it's keys and glasses and waiting till the last minute. Pressure builds up, I get upset. Until then, keep doing what your new plan is. Don't ask for her help. Don't escalate with her. Create new habits. Read about disorganization and ways to combat it. I hope this helps. It's not about her being entitled. It's about you learning new ways to deal with your disorganization in life. Also, hi, I'm Steven, and if you guys enjoy crazy stories of entitled parents, why not hit those like and subscribe buttons down below? That said, our next story is The Terrible Tale of Harry. Happy Father's Day, everyone. In celebration of this day and all the actual decent dads out there, let me regale you with the story of Harry, the good-for-nothing piece of garbage of a man whom I unfortunately share half my DNA with. My father, though only in my birth certificate. I would rather not associate myself with such a disgrace of a human being, but alas, I do not have the luxury of denying he exists. As such, I shall share the burden of knowledge with the fine folks of the internet. You're welcome. Buckle up, kids. This is going to be a long one. Chapter 1: The Happy Beginning and the Questionable Choices That Led to a Quick Fall. Harry and my mom got married in the 80s, and to this day I wonder how Harry managed to pull someone like my superhero mother, who looked like a supermodel in her prime, but I guess times were different. Mom wasn't that eager to get kids, or had resigned to not get any due to some circumstances that don't have anything to do with this, while Harry couldn't wait to be a dad. So after like 7 years of back and forth, Mom finally gave birth to my sister, Christy. Oh, the joy, the happiness. Having a kid was such a wonderful thing. So why not get another one? I was born 3 years after my sister, and that was when things slowly started to go downhill. Although Mom didn't know that yet. With a toddler and a new baby, and with my parents both working, it wasn't so easy to keep things rolling. So, when my mom got unexpectedly pregnant again with my brother John, they were in need of a nanny. Enter Elle. She deserves none of the blame as she was young, around 17, so she didn't yet know how the real world worked. She'd had a crush on Harry for years at that point, at least since she was like 13 according to Mom, and with her around so much now, and Harry, in his mid-30s at the time, being the villain of the story, an affair began. Mom suspected nothing as she wasn't the suspicious type and didn't listen in on the hours-long phone conversations he had with his young affair. After John was born, Elle became his godmother at 18, and not long after, Harry came to Mom with divorce papers. All came out then, the affair and all. Oh, and the worst part? Elle is my cousin, Mom's niece. Yup. Thankfully, she came to her senses later when she grew up more and realized the implications of if she and Harry were to have kids. Bullet dodged. Chapter 2: The Court Battle That Took Longer Than It Should Have. So, divorce proceedings began. Harry tried his hardest to screw my mother over by falsifying income reports, making ridiculous demands, quietly selling all the expensive equipment from their joined company and keeping the money, hiring either the dumbest or the sleaziest attorney possible to divide their assets, who charged for every interaction without actually doing any work, and so on and so forth. And then they came to the matter of custody. He only wanted to have custody over Christy, since she was the only one out of diapers at that point, but Mom was firm about not separating us. According to Mom, her decision to have sole custody over us came from when she once witnessed Christy asking Harry for juice when Mom was busy, and the man just ignored her completely. That was when she knew that Harry would not be a good parent to us, and she was right. Harry also didn't want to pay child support, which was wrong in all the ways since he kept their joint company and all. The judge judged him hard, and Mom won the case. Harry contested this in higher court and lost again. Rinse and repeat once more before he finally agreed to Mom's conditions. Highlights from this part include attempting to make us, his children, 1 to 4 years old at the time, to pay for the court proceedings, which was in the thousands in the currency of that time. Yes, really. Lied about the income of his now solely owned company by omitting the fact that he took 4 months sick leave for breaking his leg, which made it seem like the overall income was less than it was in reality. He wasn't even without any money for that time, thanks to our country's welfare assistance policies. Lied about his ability to pay off debts of his company, which in turn affected his ability to pay child support, and tried to thus make Mom more liable for the debt since she too signed the papers for the debt. Contested any addition or correction Mom made, sometimes multiple times. The amount of correspondence is staggering. The pile is as thick as a book. Mom saved all of it so we could read the facts later. Try to use taking care of Elle as a reason for lack of funds for child support, since she was still studying at the time. The irony is not lost to me. Also, my favorite quote from Harry's lawyer, Mr. Harry Last Name is in no way attempting to evade his responsibilities of paying what he is due. Mom's conditions were that he gets the kids once every 2 weeks, and he had to have all 3 of us there because all of us deserved to have a father. There also always had to be the possibility for us to contact her during these times. This rule was later broken, and that was when we got our first mobile phone. More on that later. Looking through the paperwork, Harry was still trying to get the child support issue overturned in 2009. Remember this year? Basically serving a lawsuit against his own children, though Mom took care of everything as our representative, and we didn't hear about it at all until much, much later. Chapter 3, the not-so-happy childhood that only got worse. And so started the era of us visiting Harry every other weekend. To Harry's credit, we did have fun during the first years of this time that I can remember. Toys to play with, movies to watch, games to play. He played Pokemon TCG with us, for instance. And our cousin, whom we loved very much, reading us bedtime stories. Well, Elle grew up and realized what was wrong with this picture and got the heck out of there with her cat. Rip Batman, you will be missed. And then after a while, Harry met Eris. All the names are fake in this story, as they tend to be on this site. I took special care in choosing Eris's, and I named her after the goddess of discord, because that's what she brought into our lives. Believe me, the name is deserved. Eris already had a daughter she left behind when she got together with Harry. I met the daughter maybe once or twice when she babysat us when Harry and Eris were out, but in the end I think the daughter cut ties with her mother at some point, because I never heard from her again after a certain point. Lucky girl, we still had to suffer for years more. Eris was the type of control freak that you never want to have to share the space with. She heavily disliked us coming over, and bit by bit convinced Harry to pay attention to us less and less. At the same time, she would criticize me and my sister for putting on weight, or how we dressed, or how we wore our hair. John got off easy. She mostly just ignored him, aside from some comments about him needing more meat around his bones that he didn't really pay attention to. She also had this habit of starting a major cleaning session on Sundays when we were supposed to go home, essentially hurrying our packing and throwing us out as fast as possible. I remember at least once when we had enough and Christy broke down, calling Mom to pick us up, and we left halfway through the week just because of how awful she was to us. It was no wonder that as soon as Christy turned 12 and she could decide whether to go to Harry's or not, she chose not to. For 3 years, it was just me and John against this monster woman. Harry, of course, didn't do anything about any of this, the wet sock of a man. During the time it was just me and Lil Bro, Harry and Eris moved to a smaller apartment. Everywhere else was about the same size as before, except for the room me and John stayed in during our visits. Our space turned from a decent room to a glorified closet that worked as an office when we weren't there. We had a sofa that opened into a bed, and the space was so small that when the sofa was open, there was no space to walk around it. At least we had a computer, which was good since we had basically nothing else to do. Gone were the days of movies and games with Harry, only replaced with bored net surfing, reading, and the occasional game we could come up with in the limited space we were confined in. Eris didn't like us running around the apartment, you see, so we could really only exist in the tiny room. The occasional mental abuse towards my preteen self was a nice change of pace, really. The area had no playgrounds nearby, so going out wasn't an option either, even if we could have dragged Harry off the sofa he sat in watching TV. No, the TV wasn't really an option either, since the sofa in the living room was barely a 2-seater, and Harry took up at least 1.5 seats. Of course, we could just sit on the floor, but it wasn't as if we could have watched anything fun anyway. When I got to age 12, I was understandably very eager to follow my sister's example and not go there again. But alas, Mom didn't want John going there alone. After negotiations, it was agreed that Christy would temporarily resume the visits, and me and her would take turns in going with John until he turned 12 too. In addition to every other weekend at Harry's, we had a tradition of spending 2 weeks at a summer cottage with him. These 2 weeks were usually fun enough, and we sometimes got to bring friends along too. Although these couple of weeks tended to elevate some of Harry's wonderfully misogynistic tendencies. For an example, while he took John with him to chop wood, I was left to wash potatoes for dinner, no matter how much I begged to wield an axe. My sheer bloodlust against the poor wood must have scared him, so I could only take out my aggression on potatoes. They were the cleanest potatoes in all the land, let me tell you. There was also this one time that he held his 50th birthday party at the cottage, where me and Christy were tasked with serving alcohol to his many middle-aged friends, some of which made passes on our then teenage selves. Harry also got drunk enough to start a fight with one of said friends, and Mom had to come take us home once again when we got too scared to stay. Mom was not happy about this. I will give Eris 1 point from this event, as she decided to be a human that day and collected a jar full of tips for us to split for the work we did. As the saying in my language goes, even a blind chicken sometimes finds a seed. Remember also that all this time, Mom was actually raising us and providing us with everything we needed. She was also studying at the time of the divorce, and after graduating worked full-time to support us. She treated all three of us equally and with love. I don't know where I would be without her, and can't even fathom the amount of work she had to do with 3 kids, a job, and without any help from her waste of space ex-husband. Interlude, childhood highlights. Before I get to the meat of why I decided to cut contact with Harry completely by the time I became an adult, here are a few more instances of absolutely horrible stuff Harry pulled while I was a kid. My birthday is around the holidays, so I very rarely saw Harry for those because we always spent the holidays at Mom's. However, there is this one exception year. That year, Harry took us to a cottage for the holidays, including my birthday. This was before us kids had our own phone. Mom tried to call Harry's phone, as well as any landline number she could get her hands on to wish me happy birthday, but he failed to answer. And in the end, I didn't get to hear Mom's wishes until we got back home. She also had no idea where we were or what we were doing the whole time, since Harry never bothered to tell her. That was why we ended up getting our first phone, so this would never happen again. We shared that phone until my 3rd year in school. It was a Nokia 3310. Another time around the holidays, we were supposed to go to Harry's. It was planned well ahead and Mom had already booked tickets to go out of the country for that time. Suddenly though, Harry backed out because he wanted to go on a vacation with Eris instead and simply couldn't take the kids with them. Mom was ticked beyond measure. In the end, she booked 3 more seats on the plane on short notice and brought us with her. I honestly vastly preferred going abroad with her instead of being stuck with Harry and Eris. Best birthday ever. On one Halloween, instead of getting us sweets in advance, our country doesn't do trick-or-treating, he gave me and John some money and sent us out in the dark evening, Nordic country, to get our candy from the store. No directions, no adult supervision, in a neighborhood we barely knew since we so rarely went out. Not to even mention that in the same building his apartment was, there was a bar on the bottom floor. We picked a direction, but the only store we found had already closed. We got lost because of my disastrous sense of direction and found our way back thanks to John's superior sense of direction like an hour later. Not a single call to make sure we were safe. When we got back without the candy since the store was closed, Harry was just sitting on the sofa watching TV and only indirectly called us dumb for going in the wrong direction after we explained the lack of sweets. Harry never bought us anything useful. Sure, he got us toys, at least when we were little, and even then he went for knockoffs instead of the toys we really wanted. But when it came to getting Christy a Vespa-type scooter to get around with, super common where I come from when you're not old enough for a car yet, this was way before electric scooters were a thing, he wouldn't give a single cent towards it, or for a car later on, or even a bike when one of ours broke down. Mom had to get them on her own, almost always secondhand. He could have afforded helping. At the time, he was actually fairly wealthy, what with the company and all, but nope. Same thing with clothes or phones or hobbies or school stuff or anything we actually needed. Harry just didn't care enough. I had respiratory issues growing up, genetic mutation, and I was strictly forbidden from spending any amount of time in tobacco smoke. Harry smoked like a chimney and liked smoking in the car. When I got the doctor's orders to avoid smoke, Mom informed Harry about it, and he had to stop smoking in the car while I was there. Well, about a year or so later, when he was picking us up, he went to light a cigarette. I immediately reminded him that I wasn't supposed to inhale smoke. His response? Still? As if a genetic mutation was going to suddenly go away. Good going, Harry. Well done on remembering your kids' health issues and knowing basics of biology. Mom got sick with cancer multiple times, but that's another story. And when Harry found out, he called Child Protective Services. It never went anywhere because Mom has always put us first and made sure that we're properly taken care of. But because he called it in, a checkup had to be made and a record written. We had a social worker from then on. Chapter 4, The Final Straw. Alright, so on to the things that made me finally open my eyes about this neglectful butt. I suffered from severe anxiety and depression since I was a kid due to undiagnosed ADHD. I only got diagnosed in my 30s. In addition, I was also bullied a ton and had some other difficulties in life that further broke me by the time I was like 15 or 16. Things got bad enough that I ended up spending a year in psychiatric care due to the stress and depression that had accumulated. I won't go into detail about all that. You're here to hear about Harry after all. Fun fact though, this was in 2009. Sound familiar? Yes, the latest year when Harry attempted to overturn child support. The lawsuit that Mom hid from us so we wouldn't view Harry in a bad light. Oh, Mom, you sweet soul. At the beginning of my treatment, Harry was involved as the second parent well enough, mainly dropping me off at the hospital and picking me up, taking part in interviews, stuff like that. But after like a month, he started showing up less and less. By the time this year was up and I was discharged, he'd all but stopped contacting me at all. I was hurt since it seemed like he'd abandoned me when I was at my lowest. Little did I know, huh? It didn't help that he'd prior to this also started to parrot Eris's negative comments about my weight. I wasn't obese, but I was a bit chubby, I suppose. Despite his own enormous beer belly, he continued to only contact me very minimally, usually only ever through my brother, and it took me a long while to figure out why this was. Apparently, Harry had this philosophy that when the kids turn to adults, it's solely their responsibility to keep up contact with the parents. So, because I was very soon turning 18, he no longer had to contact me. Christy had moved out when she turned 18, so I hadn't seen this pattern beforehand. Now that I think about it, it also coincided with when he no longer needed to pay child support for me, so he probably also didn't think he needed to check on me since he was released of any monetary responsibility. He just expected to switch the dynamic without any warning and for me to cling on to him. The final straw came when one summer he was talking to John on the phone when I walked in the room. They were talking about the summer cottage tradition, and Harry was inviting my brother there like next week or something. Only my brother. John, confused, asked Harry, "Wait, what about OP?" Harry's response? "Oh, I guess she can come if she wants." Now, this might not seem like a big deal, but after all the negative feelings of abandonment and being ignored, this really put into perspective what I'd been too blind to see before. Harry didn't care if I was there. He didn't care what I wanted or felt or if I even existed. He probably never had. So I said no. No, I don't want to go to the cottage. In fact, I don't want to see this man ever again. That was the day I cut ties with Harry, and that's how it stayed to this day. Harry did try calling me a few times afterwards on my birthdays, but I either didn't answer or kept the call short and to the point. He never understood why I cut things off. I wasn't about to explain it to him. Now, both me and my sister have not contacted Harry for years. He wasn't invited or informed when my sister got married, though apparently Christy was courteous enough to send him a picture of her and her husband's joined hands with the rings to him. In true Harry fashion, his first question was whether she got knocked up and had to marry quickly, completely oblivious to why he wasn't invited. Me and Christy both agreed to stop calling him our dad some years ago. According to Christy, she slips up every now and then, and I'm still figuring out how to keep the word dad off my tongue while referring to him. John still keeps in touch, since he never really had the same kinds of problems with Harry like we did, and I'm happy for him. He doesn't bring Harry up to me and Christy, since he respects our decision to cut ties, and only brings us news if they're unusually juicy. Such as when one day John was over at Harry's cottage. Harry mentioned something about a wedding day. In our language, wedding day and wedding anniversary have the same name. He asked Harry if someone was getting married and he said no. It was actually going to be his and Eris's wedding anniversary. They had gotten married a year prior, and none of us knew. Not even a mention over the entire year. This was shortly after I had cut ties too, so there wasn't a precedent yet for missing important life events like this. He just didn't feel like we needed to know, I suppose. Only other thing I know is that he still lives in the same city as I do, but thankfully I've never seen him around. I do keep an eye out whenever I take part in public cultural stuff. I act as a hobby. just in case, but it's safe to say that someone as uncultured as Harry will likely never cross my path. He used to brag that the only book he ever read was Fallon by Louis L'Amour because he was forced to by a teacher in school. At least, here's to hoping. Last I heard, anything about him was from his mother, my only living grandparent, who did not approve of the way Harry treated Mom and still keeps in touch with her. She told Mom that Harry has some sort of chronic inflammatory disease, psoriasis we think? Gonna have to check with Granny at some point, so there's that. With that, my story comes to an end. Not especially dramatic towards the end, but a good example of how with little things here and there, you too can become a disgusting human being. If Harry wanted his children to keep contact with their father, he really should have at least tried to be a father first. And also have not cheated on his wife with his niece. I'll probably never get over that one. So, Father of the Year, anyone? Is it too late to walk back John Krasinski's new title as World's Sexiest Man Alive? I think we got a great candidate here. Kekamu commented, "We have a saying in my mother tongue that translates to, I hope his fingers turn into fish hooks and his balls get an itch." I feel this is an appropriate sentiment toward Harry. Our next story is always so negative and entitled. My mom has to be the most negative person on the planet. When it comes to work, home life, or friends, it's always negative behavior. She complains constantly about work but refuses to find a new job. Every time I'm on the phone and ask about her day, it's a negative in how she hates her job, her coworkers, management. She was upset because my husband did not ask for her blessing to propose, even though he didn't think to because my dad passed away when I was a small child. My wedding was supposed to be small and intimate, and she did not listen to that, changing up the after party, and was hurt when we said we didn't want one. So we caved. My pregnancies, she made about herself and how hurt she was over simple things like my mother-in-law wanting to help with a baby shower. She said she didn't get enough time to bond when the babies arrived. Grant you, I was a female to male and learning how to navigate motherhood. Now my sister is engaged to a wonderful man. He has taken on the father role for her 2 kids. She feels like he does not like her even though he's so nice. The same thing happened with my husband. She feels like he does not like her. My husband is more reserved and autistic, so he likes not to go to functions. He says he learned to stay his distance so he does not become her angry point. My brother recently got into an argument with her over how she acts towards everyone. She uses the excuse, "When I'm dead and gone, you'll realize all I've done for you." She does not take accountability for any hurt feelings, even when we tell her straight out that she hurt our feelings. I'm wondering how to take a step back in dealing with her. I have a new set of twins and adjusting to a full house of children. I honestly feel like there is some depression going on, but she refuses to talk to her doctor or take any meds. I feel like her not liking our spouses stems from her husband being abusive physically and mentally, and feels like our spouses are just as bad. How do I respond when she does the whole gaslighting behavior? "I've done so much for you and this is how you treat me? I guess I'm only good when you want something." Honestly, I have to admit, I'm not quite sure where to go with this. OP mentioning the things about how her husband had been, though, makes me wonder, can this behavior be something that's stemming from a lot of experiences over a lot of years that has kind of shaped her to be this way? Like, is there maybe a little bit of leeway to give her because of what she's gone through? I don't know. Yokai Watch Fan 2102 commented, "OP, I think I know what's going on here. Your mom isn't the center of attention anymore, and that's really getting to her. OP, I think it's best you limit your interactions with your mom. Clearly, your mom is attention-seeking, and when she doesn't get it, she uses gaslighting and manipulation to get what she wants. So yeah, I recommend you tell her straight up, Mom, I'm not gonna put up with your gaslighting and manipulation anymore. If you want your grandkids or me and my husband to be a part of your life, then you're going to have to make some changes. Stop gaslighting us and go to therapy." That might be enough to snap her out of it and make her realize that what she's doing is wrong. Right now, the ball is in your court, OP. It's up to you to decide what you want to do with it. I do recommend you pass it to your mom and tell her that what she wants to do with it. Does she want to continue gaslighting you? Or does she want to go get some help for her issues? But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely crazy entitled parent story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.